Joining me is Sandra Schnakenburg, author of The Housekeeper's Secret, a memoir. When Lee Matoyer is hired to be the new housekeeper, she has no idea that she's about to become the anchor to a family in an abusive patriarch's home, setting a mystery in motion that will take decades to uncover. At the age of 72, Lee falls ill and on her deathbed asks Sandy Schnakenburg to write her story. The only problem is she doesn't know the story. Embarking on a quest to honor Lee's final wishes, Sandy takes an emotional and thrilling journey, unveiling shocking truths about herself and her housekeeper. Sandra has a BS in finance and an MBA from the University of Southern California, and in 2010, she left a career in corporate finance to study creative nonfiction. Welcome to the show, Sandra. Nice to have you on.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, we're talking about the housekeeper secrets, but we are talking about a lot of secrets. And I guess the book came out December 3rd. What? How much of the secrets are we going to talk about on the show today? What do we want to reveal to the audience?
Well, we can let the audience know that Lee had a secret that she didn't want to be found and she didn't want to be found out. And why that is, the audience might want to pick up the book. There is an incredible journey as a part of this discovery, and we don't want to give the details because it would steal the story from the reader who absolutely follows my footsteps in the whole discovery.
Right. So we shall start at the beginning, or I don't know if it's the beginning, but when you are, as I said in the intro, you were at the age of 72 when Lee dies and asks you to write her story. Were you where were you at that point? I mean, she's asking you to write a story that, as I said, you knew nothing about. You are what? I don't. And what was your reaction?
Well, I was probably early 30s at the time, and Lee was 72. And, and she asked me on her deathbed if I would write her story. And this is a story that she had always said, one day I'm going to write a book and nobody will ever believe it. And all my family would be like, we'd laugh, we'd say, Lee, really? Like, is this a threat or a promise? Like, what is this story you keep talking about? Well, she goes, just wait, just wait. Well, then she unfortunately got cancer and she didn't have time and she asked me to write this story. Now, back up, when I was a child, I was 3.5 when she arrived in our home, but all the years that she was with us, I would beg her, like I just had this feeling something was off. And I'd say, Lee, like, what about your family? Like, she always said her family was all dead. She lost her husband and son in a car accident, which we later found out that was a fabricated part of her story to cover the real story. And she had no family alive, no nieces and nephews, and I actually got reprimanded several times for prying. So my mom said, leave it alone. We're going to lose Lee if you keep asking. So when she asked me, I was just, dumbfounded, like, Lee, all those years, you wouldn't tell me anything. Now, what do you want me to write about? She goes, you'll figure it out. And
So
that's what,
my question is, why? I don't know if maybe you've already answered it, but why did she choose you? Because all those years you were kind of questioning her. You had a sense that there was something that wasn't quite right because she chose you as opposed to anybody else in the family to write her story.
that's a good question. There's a couple reasons. One was my curiosity was incredible. I just never stopped asking her. But two, Lee and I had a really special connection. I was the fifth child in my family, so was she. At 13, I was in a traumatic car accident and I had a traumatic brain injury. And somehow Lee knew exactly how to handle me. My parents had, I don't want to say written me off, but they didn't know. They were happy I lived. It was a miracle I lived, actually. But my condition was not good. And Lee went through doing puzzles, doing all kinds of therapy, cleaning, like in the Karate Kid, when they had to clean and do discipline. I was shining chandeliers and brasses, but it was really what it was doing is helping me focus, teaching me how to utilize my brain again and reignite those areas that were injured. She knew exactly what I needed. And we formed a bond during all these exercises that was inseparable. And I knew her, like she identified with me, I identified with her. And then at the deathbed, she knew that I would do it because the perseverance it took me to get through that accident was the same perseverance I needed to find out her truth and her
And
story.
why? Yeah. So that was that perseverance, that was the motivation. What do you think? Do you think what was without giving away the story, but how closely related was her story to your story when you had the accident? Something, obviously, she
Uh,
brought you. Yeah.
I like that. You really zoned in there and the connection because how did she know what to do about a traumatic brain injury? Well, she had gone through her own horrific past, and it's a past that went on for years. Of course, we can't divulge the secret, but I will say she is a survivor, and what she survived was the unthinkable. And she chose she identified with my injury, and she identified with what I needed to get well because she had gone through something unthinkable. And Viktor Frankl talks about this a lot, is that a human being chooses their attitude. It's not what happens to us, it's what we do with what happens to us. And that attitude that she chose was to live her life fully after what happened to her and reinvent her complete identity. So when I discovered her secret, which this is just a part of it, is, but it's not the secret, it's nothing about what happened to her, which you'll have to read the book. It's Lee was not who she said she was. She was not her name. She was not her birth date. She was not the past story she came to our front door in 1965 with. None of this was true, but her identity, she wanted to reinvent herself so that she could be the person that she was meant to be in our family. And she was. She was the hero in our family. She had to disassociate herself from her past completely so that it didn't haunt her identity in our family and who she wanted to be.
So did you or anybody else in the family feel betrayed? When you're living with someone whose story is not their real story, they aren't telling you the truth. So
Mhm.
how does that impact how you felt about her?
Well, I think when you know Lee, the person I asked this question through my discovery process. First, I was shocked. First, I was a little betrayed. That word is correct because I'm like, why didn't she ever tell me? But then when I really uncovered everything, I understand why she did what she did. And I think the reader gets a choice to make their own opinion as well, because in our society we judge people for what they've gone through, for maybe if they've gotten DUIs or arrests or different things that happen. We judge. She didn't want to be judged. She wanted an opportunity to be the person she was born to be, to have a purpose and to live her life fully. She brought spirit of the Chicago Cubs into our family. She brought life, love. She gave so much to our family that all the goodness she had, you know, had up inside of her was poured out in the love of our family. She became our family. We were all one together. And that was part of her healing by her helping us heal from a narcissistic father, from verbal abuse. She saw what she had once suffered in our family. And then she was able to be that anchor for all of us.
So that anchor, that personality, that attitude, I'm thinking her core personality. She was a good person. She was a good soul. And yet she had to deal with all that stuff in her past. And then she changed her context, actually. Her family, in another family, she was able to, as you say, she flourished is the word that I think about, and helped you to do that and the rest of your family.
Absolutely. She was the heart of our family because she stabilized us and removed, we had a chaos, noisy, loud. It was just unraveling by the edges. And she was the voice of wisdom. But what she did is that she sacrificed being ever seen her family members again. And what she did to me broke my heart. And I mean, what she done to me, what she did to her family, what I discovered she did to her family, like never seeing them again and actually identifying them as dead, was heartbreaking. But at the same time, after one reads the story, you understand like why, and you also understand that this is what she had to do. It's a really interesting concept because family never never goes away, but what happened at the end, it comes full circle with our family and what she left behind. The story comes
Goes full
for
circle.
full
And you,
circle in a way that I love. Mhm.
and a memoir, you talk a lot about memoir and why you wrote a memoir and the importance of memoirs. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay, well, I didn't know a lot about writing when I was, asked to write her story. So when I found, her ashes in my mother's closet after my mother passed away, it reignited. It's like an inciting incident in writing that I needed to fulfill this promise to Lee. And I didn't know much about writing, so I started to take writing classes as the story unfolded. And when I chose memoir, I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. I'll just write about Lee's truth. But memoir is my story. It's my story, not only when Lee came to our house when I was a young child, but all the elements of what my family endured, and then who Lee was in that mess. And then as I unraveled Lee's story, it's like a braided memoir where it comes together with two stories and why they're all, coming to a head of, you know, it's almost like a divine appointment when she arrived at our house. But memoir, I had to really understand who I was, how my brain worked. I read many, many books. One was The Plot Whisperer, talks about being a plotter or a pantser. Plotter is a very analytical person, which I was in finance, and I outlined the story and I tried to figure out how to write a memoir with the arc, inciting incident. And a pantser is more of a person that has intuitive, big picture, very creative thinking. And I'm ambidextrous. I was both. So when I sat down to write, I had to know who I was and how my brain worked and really think about writing the structure and then taking this story in an intuitive way of who Lee was and what she really wanted me to express to what did she want the world to know? It wasn't the gruesome details of what happened to her. It was actually the point of her life, like how she took out of the ashes and made this and became a hero in our family.
Did did you ever feel as you're writing the memoir or when you finish the memoir, did I do it right? Am I did I write it the way she would have wanted me to? Or were there any questions, or did you question yourself in any way after completing the memoir?
Oh goodness, this is such a fully loaded question.
Well, it's meant to be.
Let me just say,
Yeah.
I question myself every step of the way. And I
Mhm.
and I really felt the book was never going to be done. It was about a 10-year endeavor, and I wrote it like 5 different times in different ways because I wanted to honor her request in the best way possible. I wrote about 3,000 pages. The book is 300 pages. So you can see I had to also heal my own past while writing this book, which I believe that part of the journey is in memoir is healing one's own self. I had to really come to grips with telling my family's story, which and my personal struggles, which were horrific. Um, and that was hard for me because I really didn't want to tell anybody about my family or myself. But then what is memoir? Memoir is truth. And memoir, you know, when Lee came to our house, she was a part of all these stories that happen. So I realized I had to weave in every bit of it and come to my truth. What's the point of telling somebody else's truth when you can't come to your own truth? I would be a fraud. And memoir is about authenticity, truth, heart and soul, getting to the bottom, and it's about healing. And this is what my journey was. I believe Lee was still teaching me from a heavenly realm. She had taught me so many things on my earthly time here, her earthly time here. And then she gave me this assignment on her deathbed. And I never saw coming that it was going to be this hard, but I'm so grateful that she asked me to write the book, and I'm grateful that I got to really reflect on the different incidences in our family and who she was in those incidences to our family, and then heal from it and be in order to be able to write it in the way I did. It is a page turner. It reads like fiction, but it's a story that after writing all that healing, it weeded out all the things that didn't really feed the story, and now it got to the crux of everything. It just the story reads like it's a page turner, and I think the readers, the feedback I've been getting has been phenomenal.
I'm thinking about you. How did you sleep at night? How did you go to bed at night? You're talking about a page turner. You're writing the page turners. Like, yeah. Eh, but you mentioned the word reflection and being reflective as you're writing the memoir. What about vulnerability? Your vulnerability. Here you are. As you say, you're being truthful. It's writing this memoir is unveiling all your family, or not all, but your family secrets, your own secrets, as well as telling her story, Lee's story.
Well, first let me address the sleep at night bit and then my
Okay.
vulnerability, because I will tell you, I quit writing this story several times. And I was haunted at night. Literally, I was pacing. I believe that there are like spirits and angels that can really come to your conscience and when you sleep. And my husband is an engineer, and he's very matter of fact, and he saw me pacing in the middle of the night. I'm like, I can't, I quit the story, but they're haunting me. I can't do it. And he's like, you got to finish the story, Sandy. I know it's hard. You got to finish the story. So I will say the not sleep at night was very hard. But that's what drove me, is there was a spiritual reason. I mean, I just had to get this done. So as far as the vulnerability, first of all, I went to several retreats. I took several classes. I did everything. I read, writing books probably till over and over again. I tabbed them. I memorized lines. I was just obsessed with learning to write. And that was like about 3 years of my 10-year endeavor was just obsession over writing, learning how to write. So I did my own MFA, if you will. But one thing I was very sensitive about, I met a lady at retreat. She was doing a first podcast, and she was a plot developer. And I said, I need help. I go, I have a book that they want me to, a memoir that want me to write my personal story and then Lee's story. But I think everybody who reads this story only wants Lee's story. And that's not, as vulnerable for me, because it's like one arm's away, right? Like I loved Lee, but it's not my story. I don't have to go to my heart. But she goes, and I said, I think I'm going to bore the audience with my story. And she absolutely disagreed. She goes, the audience wants to know you. They want to know the author. They want to know the story, who you are, what you suffered, and all these things. And I realized that when I get feedback now about the story, people are like, wow, I didn't realize you went through all that, because it's similar to what Lee went through to survive. So our lives were very parallel in different generations. And we came together, and she healed in her generation, and then she helped me heal in mine. And through the writing process, I was able to reflect upon that, like who she was in my life and what the writing did to help me heal, to get to the heart of the matter, heart of the issues in my heart. Mhm.
Well, as an author, I mean, obviously you get, and you've gotten some, the book, which I mentioned, came out in December, and lots of great feedback. And what about and you've written a memoir, and it's obviously very personal, it's not fiction. When you get critiques I'll use the word criticism. Um, have you gotten any? And when you do, then where do you go from there emotionally?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so the biggest critiques that I've received have been people who haven't read the book. So like if somebody ran an article about the story and they would make assumptions about there was one article that went out that gave away the secret and it really it bothered me. But then people responded in such a um and it was only a few people. Like there was 290 responses. I would say there was five people that out of those that actually said things that didn't really apply to the story because the responses were based on the article and not the real story. Um, and I realized that my answers would be like, well, read the book and you'll find out those answers, you know? Um, and as far as people who would say, well, this story is more about Sandy's life than it is about Lee's. Well, yeah, Lee's been dead for 30 years this year. Um, and we know what we know by investigative journey. We can't interview somebody who's gone. So we know what we know, and that's what happened to Lee, but not how she responded to what happened to her was to re-identify herself. So we know the pain was very deep, but we can't ask her what exactly happened. How did you exactly feel? This is how it is. So when people do respond or critique, they want to know more about that. You can't interview a dead person. And but I would say the beautiful about thing about the story and this particular memoir is that it covers multiple issues in families. A lot of memoirs are just about like recovering from alcoholism or a death of a loved one or a drug addiction. There are a lot of single topic memoirs. This memoir has multiple issues to address. And it's got historical content. It has mental illness. It has widespread. So different readers identify with different parts of this story that brings in a wider audience and a bigger response, which people are like, wow, I never thought about that. This my family went through the same thing or similar things. I've had a lot of that. I did have my first rating was a 1 on Goodreads and Amazon by a person that never read the book and they responded to it the day it came out. And I think this person does this to a lot of books, but that was already over. Now I'm already at 5 stars with all the positive reviews. So I'm really grateful that people that have read the book and actually know the story have been so received it so well. And really my biggest comment is I have read this book and I can't get it out of my head. It sticks with you. It sticks with you for days and even
I
weeks.
think it's going to stick with you for a lifetime.
Oh, the reader.
Yeah.
Well, the
Yeah.
reader will never forget this story when they read it.
Yeah. Because you talked about multiples, there are just multiple issues. I just want to mention some of those because survival and resilience. I think we've been talking about resilience, psychological abuse, sexual assault, all of these. I mean, these mental asylums. You can go on, but all this is all part of the fabric of your story of your memoir.
Hmm. Absolutely. And it's also a story that, Lee was born in 1922. And what happened to her was in the 40s. So if you look at it like that, and then she came to our house in the 60s. And then, she died in the 90s. And then I discovered her story in 2010. And now in 2024, the story is released. So you can see this, it's a journey of history of our country, of what things that went on during all of that, and then who she became in a human spirit way. Like this is two people, two like not just two, but like our two families coming together in unlikely circumstances and becoming one family. Where Lee became our family, we became one together, and it's so beautiful and it was so lovely, and we just helped each other that it's like how blessed was our family to have her, and what a blessing she was to this world. And then to ask and want her story told after she's gone, because she didn't want to have to answer any of those questions. But she wanted people to know that, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. And I love that.
Well, she was a, yeah, but your family was a blessing for her. You talk about how she was a blessing for you, and then you also, all of you, in the context of your family, you're a blessing for her.
Yeah. Yeah. We ended up knowing we're actually, we know her family now, and we connect with them every year, and we just it's like a part of her is still alive. And also the person she was in our family, we get to share that with her family, that the part that they didn't know, because they only knew what happened to her. So they didn't really think she was a very well person. Yet we come and tell them a whole different story.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You tell them the intimate story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The truth of who she
The
really was.
truth. Yeah. We have a couple minutes left, Sandra. So I want to make sure, I mean, it's it's an exciting book. I recommend it to the audience, to our audience. So give us a platform or platforms where that we can go to. So to buy the book, I'm sure bookstores everywhere online. And if you have a website for more information about you,
Absolutely. Well, but first, I want a little bit of bragging rights. I won a book award, a gold book award for nonfiction book authors, and I'm just thrilled about it because people have taken this book to another level with that award. It is found on where all books are found on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, Goodreads, just about every platform. Simon and Schuster is this distributor, so you could find it where our books are sold. My website is sandraschnakenburg.com. My last name is spelled Schnakenburg.
great. Thanks so
Um,
much for being
yeah,
on the show today, Sandra. This was great. Great story. Everybody get out there and read the story. And there are lots of secrets we didn't, I don't think we revealed any of them. We just whetted people's appetites. So thank you. Thank you so much. The Housekeeper's Secret.
thank you for having me.
Joining me today is author Patricia Bonis. Her book is Jeddah Bride, a memoir. Patricia Bonis fell madly in love with Rahman Abar, scion of a wealthy Saudi Arabian family, and when he suggested they marry, it was the happiest day of her life. A smart, free-spirited girl who attended Wellesley College, Patricia was not prepared for life as a Saudi woman, a life spent looking through curtains and veils at the world outside, a life that of necessity was curtailed and protected from the toxic masculinity of the culture, a life that for an American girl used to sneaking out and hitchhiking was dangerous and frightening and alien. She was not prepared to give up all her freedom, but shouldn't love be enough to overcome everything? Patricia is a renowned interior designer who has spent more than 3 decades designing the homes, offices, and embassies of some of the world's most influential leaders, including top CEOs, ambassadors, and international financiers. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you on.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for your interest in my book, Jeddah Bride.
Jeddah Bride, what a story. Is this a unique story? Is this something that has only happened to you, or is this something that goes on, perhaps more than we are aware of? Because there are lots of issues embedded in your stories. Your story, yeah.
I think my story is unique in the way that it happened in Saudi Arabia. There were very few foreign women that married into Saudi Arabia. If you look at the entire Middle East, it's very common that Americans will entangle themselves with Middle Easterners. There are a lot of countries involved, but Saudi Arabia is a small country, a very super religious country, Orthodox Islam. It's remote. You know, there are only so many Saudis. And the fact that he was an important Saudi gave it even more uniqueness. So I think I'm one of the only Americans that actually could tell this story. It's maybe the only. But there, as that movie with Sally Fields, Not Without My Daughter.
Yeah.
That happened in Iran. I mean, there are so many kidnapped children that, and that's really the uniqueness of the story. My children were kidnapped. I didn't see them, speak to them, or even see a picture of them for 14 years. And they were held in Saudi Arabia, and they were American citizens.
So you fell madly in love. Okay, let's talk about the madly in love. As you say, you come from completely different worlds. Saudi Arabia, the United States, Wellesley graduate, as I read in the intro. Yeah. So what was it? Just physical attraction? He's a wealthy Saudi. He's well respected. What was the connection? Let's start with that.
Okay. Well, in chapter 2, you can read all about it. He was basically a young man that had gone to England. He was from Saudi Arabia, but at that time there were no good schools in Saudi Arabia. He was sent to England to boarding school from when he was 6 years old. So he had the British accent. He acted like he was British, and he was very sophisticated. Now, go back to the late 1970s in the United States. Everybody was a hippie. Guys would be walking around with torn jeans, and they take you out. You go to a bar and stand there on a date. Nobody went to dinner. So this guy drives up in a fancy car. He's good looking. He's got gorgeous clothes on, exotic. And he wanted to take me out and bring me to restaurants. And it was like another world. It felt so grown up and mature. And that British accent was captivating for me. I was very naive. I was 17 years old. So I have to excuse myself.
You do. You were a baby. We will excuse you. You were. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So you're 17, and I'm thinking you're 17, and obviously I'm making the assumption you have friends, you have people who are, aware that you're dating him, that you're in love with him. What did they have to say? Are we talking about other?
Yeah. Everybody was enthralled with the idea. Don't forget, there had been an oil embargo in the United States. Nobody could get gasoline. They kept talking about the Saudi Arabian king. King Faisal was the richest man on earth. It was the whole thing going, my friends were like, oh my God, you're dating a Saudi? What does he look like? And then when they see him, they see his beautiful French suit, or he was very interesting too. He was at business school at Boston University studying finance. everyone was enthralled. Women were throwing themselves at him. It was a different culture then. It was Boston, late 70s, early 80s. Lots of Iranians had, flooded in, lots of different Middle Easterners, and it was a unique and exciting time where we were in America. We were just now, getting to know the Middle East. So I got all positive reactions except from my parents. My parents weren't that enthused.
they they'd had a lot of experience, or a lot more experience than you had.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm picturing it as you're describing it. Boston University, in Boston. Actually, that's my alma mater.
Really?
Yeah. So I know what you're talking about. I get the picture. I'm thinking this sexy guy, but he's in your country, right? And
Yeah.
so that's very different than when he is in his own country.
Exactly.
Yeah. So your parents didn't think this was such a good idea. So how did you manage to marry him and then go and live in Saudi Arabia, Jeddah?
Well, he proposed to me. We had this romance for about 3 years, and then he proposed, and I was still in love. I mean, we hadn't been anywhere except in the West. And every nightclub, Paris, London, restaurants, New York, Regine. I mean, I can't even tell you what I did and how much fun I had. And when he proposed, I said yes, unequivocally yes. And so then he said, well, you should come to the country and see it. And I flew there to Saudi Arabia, and I actually ignored every red flag. I ignored the red flags. Okay, I did. I admit. I had a horrible experience at their beach house on the Red Sea, and that should have scared me, and I should have left quietly and not come back. But I didn't, because I was so far in already. I don't know. I'm a fighter. I'm a fighter. I don't
like a
give up
challenge.
easily.
This was going to be a big challenge for you.
Yeah, but I wasn't afraid. I don't know. I'm still that way. Just writing a book. I'm not an author. Well, I am now, but I just don't care. I'm talking to people. I don't want to ever back down in anything in my life. I will not back down. So and usually that's brought me success. Unfortunately, this first thing that I did with him, marrying him and then having children, did give me a lot of pain and suffering. But I survived, and my children are survived, and we're all, we know each other, we see each other, the kids and and we survived it, but it was a big mistake. It was a big crash and burn experience. Yeah.
So you said you hadn't seen the kids for 14 years. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the kids were in Saudi Arabia
the whole time. They were held there. They were educated there. And I didn't know, I couldn't get to them. You have to imagine no internet. Their phone lines in Saudi were like, there was one telephone line for the entire compound, and there was a person that answered the phone. The phone didn't go directly into rooms in the house. It went to a telephonist who was at the gatehouse, and then he would connect to the particular extension in the house. It was my in-laws' house, and a very, very large house. And they wouldn't put me through. So I couldn't speak. There was no mail. I mean, I would mail a letter, it would go into a void. And not one single friend of mine. I made so many female friends when I lived there. I was there for a few years. Nobody would even send me a picture of my children. Nobody gave me information. They all didn't know what happened, and they all wanted to keep to themselves. They didn't want to get involved. So that was my, and the only reason I did connect with my children 14 years later is that an anonymous person called me in my office in New York and said, your son is in school, high school, boarding school in Indiana right now. And I didn't know that. The State Department he was on a watch list. The State Department didn't call me. The only way I knew was from this anonymous person that told me so, and I got a private investigator, and yes, my son was finishing up high school at Culver Academy in Indiana, unbeknownst to me. So I waited until he got to BU, which was that following September, and I immediately ambushed him at his apartment, and we started having a relationship. He didn't even know who I was when I knocked on the door. He said, "Who are you?" So it was pretty upsetting. But
And
thank
I'm
goodness.
wondering what they said about you. He didn't know who you were, but where did he come
Well,
from?
what he had
Yeah.
been told by his father is she doesn't want us. I didn't want him as my husband. I would have stayed friends. I certainly would have stayed friends with him. I just didn't want to be married to him when he's off cheating with other women. And it was horrible. I probably would have ended up dying of an STD if I'd stayed with him. So I ended up divorcing, and he told the children after he kidnapped them that I did not want them. And by the way, they were kidnapped from Florida in the United States. A Florida judge, ruled that he could have unsupervised visitation with his children because he'd never done anything wrong. So why would, and I said he threatened to kidnap them. Nope, it didn't work. They let him have the children unsupervised, and within 1 hour they were on an airplane and on their way to Saudi Arabia. So everything was stacked against me, and that's the thing when you're in Saudi Arabia or married to a Saudi, our laws don't protect you. Certainly not there. But even here, there's so many, married people where the spouse takes the kids, and the international law is woefully insufficient, and it's very hard to resolve these situations. There are thousands and thousands of Americans right now fighting to get to see their own children in other countries. But I think Saudi's the worst, because you could be killed. They could easily just say, okay, what are you doing here? You can't come in, and they could throw you in jail, and that'll be the end of you. So it's a scary situation.
So in telling your story, what would you say to women? You say that there are thousands of kids and mothers separated from their kids from the same kind of situation. But so what would you say to a naive young woman who falls madly in love, a similar situation to yours? What would you say to them? I mean,
I would say to them, I would warn them, don't do it. Don't do it. The law doesn't uphold you. You are on your own, baby. It's just not worth it. There are a lot of guys that you could be married to and have children with. You always think when you're in this relationship and you're in love, you think there's never going to be another one. But there always is. There always is. There always is. I just was talking to my daughter on the phone. Not my Sultana, my Arab daughter, but I did get remarried, and I have another daughter, an American, Amanda. And I was just telling her about 10 minutes ago, Amanda, there's always another guy. And sometimes it's even a better guy than the one you left. And I hate to say that. I don't mean to sound hardcore, but it's true. It's true. If you want to love someone and someone to love you back, you can find them. Don't get mixed up with these like sketchy countries. I'm sorry, it's sketchy.
Yeah.
Their laws say that the father is sovereign over his wife and his children. He can kill you and he can kill his children, and it's okay.
So we have to be better informed. I think just in general, I think not, as you're saying, I guess American women are really naive when it comes to that. The culture, the laws, the legalities, I guess.
Yeah.
Number one, number two. They're just not aware. So now in terms of like your relationship with your kids, what's it like?
Well, my son Kareem, he chose to stay connected with his family in Saudi Arabia. He runs the big family business. I've spoken to him many times about it. I don't blame him. It's a very big company. He's doing very well. He has a great life. We see each other occasionally when he travels. I traveled to Dubai to see him get married. I wouldn't go to Saudi Arabia, but I did go to Dubai with hesitation. And the minute I thought it might get sketchy, I quickly jumped on a plane and left. Because his dad, my ex-husband, was not happy when he realized I was at the wedding. So I left the next day. I figured, why even get involved? And my daughter, Sultana, actually lives in the United States. She found that as a woman, it wasn't as good for her as it was for her brother. So she went to college at Wellesley, as I did. And after that, she went to graduate school. And she's living now in the United States. And we see each other all the time. In fact, I spoke with her last night on the phone. both my children are okay with the fact that I wrote a book about their dad and about their family and about their country. They're hesitant about, they hope that are no repercussions that they have to experience. That would be a shame after all that's been done to them and to me. It would certainly be a shame if there were repercussions. But they both gave me the okay when I said I want to write a book. They said, okay, look, it's your story to tell, so tell it.
What about the repercussions? What are there specific ones that they are aware of or that they're thinking about or that could happen? Negative,
Well,
obviously.
my son in business, I mean, he could be affected somehow. The government could, I don't know. You know what? It's a big world. It's a big country. I don't think this is going to make waves, but it could. I will say there was an article about my story in the Daily Mail, which is mainly in English, a British
Yeah.
publication, and every Saudi we know has a connection to England. Many of them were there, many of them read it. People have been contacting my daughter and saying, oh my God, we read the story about your mom and your dad. It's incredible. Can she send us an autographed copy of the book? So that's good. At least they want an autographed copy of my book. So I was very happy to hear that. So far, there's no death threats or anything. I don't think there will be. I think it's a true story. It's very personal. I told everything as it happened, exactly as it happened to me. And I made no accusations or assumptions or, theories. I just told the truth of what happened. And that's what it is. It's my personal story.
And in your personal story and having experienced all of that, what about your sense of self? How did that change? I mean, here you are. I'm not going to, yeah, you're this young, madly in love young girl. You're not naive. And then you experience what happened to you in Saudi Arabia, the way you were treated as a young woman, as a married woman. So how did that impact your sense of self?
Well, I felt like a total failure at the beginning when it happened. I was alone, completely alone. My parents, for some reason, they just I was always rebellious. I think they wanted to once and for all teach me a lesson. So they thought, well, you're safe here in America, but we're not going to help you with any of the details. You figure it out. You got yourself in, you get yourself out. And that's what I did. I had to fight the law, with the lawyers myself. I had to deal with the State Department myself, my house that I had. I was spending all my money my meager salary, I was spending it all on lawyers. I had to sell jewelry. My mother said, we're not giving you any money to help you out of this. You've got your jewelry, all those diamonds you received, you sell them and figure it out yourself. And they were a little bit heartless in that way, but I think it made me stronger. I got myself out of all my financial entanglements. I paid all my debts. I paid all my bills. I worked, and I'm still working today. Okay, I've been working since 30 years old when this all came down. I've been financially responsible and fiscally responsible, and I learned how to deal with things. So my failure, through sheer force, through sheer will, I turned this into a positive thing, and I did, and I'm proud of that. So I feel like this was my life. This was my life. Maybe I needed this to learn that I'm not almighty and I can't just do what I want. I don't know. I'm still bold. I'm still hopeful. I'm still loved. I'm intact. But it was a scary thing. And I'm writing this book, and the way the public has received it. If you look at Amazon and you see those reviews, every single person enjoyed reading my book. They loved it. They loved the honesty. And I am so glad that I was able to write this and be honest and tell the story. And I'm just proud of myself right now. I'm proud of myself. And I hope, it was a journey. It was a big journey. And I hope that other people, it gives them inspiration.
I think it definitely will. And I think you talk about, like, you were bold and it humbled you, but at the same time, it sounds like it really, I mean, you became much stronger, much more, I mean, it stronger than, and more realistic, obviously. So how did that impact? Because now, and I think I said it in the beginning, you're a renowned interior designer. Okay. And you've been very successful in business. How it would seem to me that the experience you had there was something that impacted in a positive way your ability to do what you do or do what you've done. Past 3 decades, I guess you've been a designer for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. And it made me realize that a person like me cannot just be under a veil, not working, not being creative, not producing anything except children, not sculpting my own life. You know, I had too many dreams, too many, too many ideas, too many things I wanted to do, and I couldn't squash it all. Now, if you're a person that just doesn't dream, doesn't have any ideas, doesn't just, would rather, I don't know, just live like that, that's okay. You're fine. You can do that. But if you have dreams and hopes and have ideas of what you want to see yourself doing, don't be afraid to act on it. Don't be afraid to fight for it. Don't be afraid to maybe give up something, lose something, to fight for yourself. And then one day you may gain that back, the thing you lost. And that's kind of, I can't tell the world what to do. Every person has to know themselves. And by the way, I do know myself partially because I had 15 years of therapy and 10 years of group therapy where I had 8 or 10 people in a group shouting at me and criticizing me and encouraging me and helping me develop my idea of who I am, refine it, and be able to present it, and fight for it and to stand up for it. So it's not easy. And, I just advise people to learn about themselves and follow their passions and their dreams and whatever it is they want to do. And you probably will get there.
So be aware of who you are and what the choices are out there. And there are lots of choices, is what I hear you saying.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, lots of choices. And you talk about being active. You're not sitting in suburbia, going to the country club, although you are a world a world, I guess, competitive equestrian.
Yeah, well, no,
world class.
I'm not world famous in my equestrian. I do competitive show jumping at the World Equestrian Festival in Florida and all over the East Coast of the United States, wherever there are horse shows. I jump. I don't jump high like professional, but I have horses and I do ride every day and I do compete in show jumping, which it's scary. It's scary, and a lot of people have gotten injured, and I try to be as careful as I can, but that's another passion of mine. I just can't sit still. I never could. It's a curse and a blessing.
Yeah.
That's my life.
We have 3 minutes left, and I have to ask this question. What is, your first husband, we know who he is, as you've described him. Now your husband, how different is he than your first husband?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
My husband now, Mitchell, is the most wonderful man. He is an independent, he's self-made businessman. He's so kind. It's funny. We were at a book signing. He loves everything about me. He doesn't try to push me around or tell me what to do. He's proud of me. And the book sign, it was a big book club. There were about 30 ladies. And one of the questions they asked was, how did your present husband feel about the fact that you're wrote a book and you're talking about your first husband? And my husband Mitchell was there. And so the lady, I said, well, why don't you ask Mitchell? And he's sitting there kind of at the edge of the group and looking at his cell phone. And the woman asked him, how do you feel about your wife doing this? And he looked up, he goes, she wrote a book? And everybody started laughing. Like he was just laughing, saying, of course I'm proud of her. Of course I'm proud of her and who she is. And it's okay by me. It's her story. But he was so funny. He popped his eyes up like blink, blink. She wrote a book. So my husband looks at life with humor and wit, and he's smart and he's hardworking like me. We both pursue our careers, and I'm very lucky that I got this, this chance to have another life.
I don't think you're lucky as you're telling your story. It sounds like you're pretty deliberate, and you know who you are and what you have to do to be satisfied and to pursue all the stuff that you talk about. I mean, maybe luck comes in somewhere, but it sounds like you're not, you're in control of your choices. Anyway,
I
yeah,
think so. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you for that.
So Patricia, we only have a couple minutes left. Give us a website, other platforms to go to where we can buy your book and get more information about you and what you do.
Okay, well,
1 minute, actually.
Okay, my book Jetta Bride's available on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, and on many independent bookstores. They're developing my website. It will be Patricia Bonis Author. It should be launched this week. I do have an Instagram, Jetta Bride Book, and I've been posting things like that, but it's taking a while to get the website going. This book only came out a few months ago, and it's a lot to digest, So Patricia Bonis book Patricia Bonis Author will be my website.
Great. Thanks so much for being on the show today. Love talking to you.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
great story. And
Wonderful
a good end.
interview.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye.
Bye.